Welcome to the 2% Club, where we talk all things work, wealth, and wellness, with the founders, funders, and forward thinkers rewriting old playbooks with intention. I'm your host, Rachel Hirsch, venture investor, wellness operator, and founder of Wellness Growth Ventures. Each week, we dive into bold conversations about scaling companies, building wealth, investing wisely, and staying mostly sane while doing it. Welcome back to the 2% Club podcast, where we talk all things work, wealth, and wellness. I am your host, Rachel Hirsch, and today we're going to do things a little bit different. Today is a solo episode, my first one, and I'm so nervous, but it's also the end of season 1. We're 25 episodes in. I'm really effing proud, and I'm going to say that out loud because I don't think I feel that often. Someone literally texted me this morning and asking for podcasting tips, and I was like, I'm the last person you should be reaching out to. I constantly feel like I'm flailing. So I'm going to root this moment in the fact that, I'm really proud that we have done 25 episodes. There have been so many things thrown at me during this time period, and I have loved the podcast. It's been like hard at times, and it's been challenging at times, and frustrating, 100% frustrating at almost all times. But I've loved it. And let me tell you why I've loved it. Because for basically 25 episodes now, we have interviewed arguably the best female founders. These are founders that I have looked up to, some of them I've invested in, some of them are friends, but all of them are people who I aspire to be like, who inspire me, who have taught me so much, and honestly, who I care about deeply. So to be able to have a chunk of their time and ask them really real and honest questions that not every time was I 100% confident that they would answer, has been such a joy. And I always joke I'm like a little spectrum because I have so many questions. It's not even that. It's just that I am so curious. If you were to sit in front of me, I would just ask you questions for hours because I want to know everything about you. I want to know how you got to where you are, why those decisions were made. Like, I only have my perspective in my life, so I want to understand you. So the podcast has been really such a joy. But a lot of you have asked questions about money and investing. So today, that's what we're going to dig into. And we're actually going to start with money anxiety because half the people that have asked about it are super stressed when they ask. Like, you can tell their height. Like, coming from the queen of anxiety, I can confidently say they're anxious when they're asking me for money advice. It is they don't know what to do. They've never been educated. And you know what? Part of the reason they haven't been educated is I would say we're the first generation of women, most of us, that are really in charge of our own finances. We couldn't even open credit cards without a cosigner until 1974. Well, I guess that is a lot of years ago now, but for me, that feels like just a few years before I was born. But I also want to quickly just define money anxiety because it's vastly different than money insecurity. Money anxiety is anxiety. It's where it's overwhelming. Anxiety often is just really irrational. It's not indicative of how much you earn or how much you have saved. It's just this big looming thing that you haven't dug into. And there's so much about money insecurity, but today we're going to focus on money anxiety that I think is incredibly common in women because of the lack of exactly what we're saying, because there's a lack of generational understanding. And this is really the first time we're the first generation, which I think is really common. When you're the first of anything, it's anxiety inducing. So hopefully generations to follow will have less of this, but we're starting as the millennial generation of women with money anxiety. And I think it's like 72, maybe it's 75, but I think 72% of women, millennials, said that they were really anxious about money more than their jobs, more than their relationships. It is the number one thing that they are super anxious about. And that's so sad, but so real. And so the other half of the people maybe weren't money anxious, but they didn't know a lot and they wanted to learn more. So there's a few pieces that I want to dig into, but I want to start with the money anxiety piece because I think that it's not talked about enough. And I think people put it off because it produces anxiety. And so much easier said than done to like deal with it head on. But unfortunately, like, I don't even think all the Zoloft in the world would take away money anxiety. I think like we do have to deal with it head on and just give ourselves grace for knowing we are Gen 1 of this. And we're figuring it out. But part of the reason it's so important that we do figure it out is because of this generational wealth transfer. So I think it was until 2025, women had, so like zero BC until 2025, a lot of years, women had accumulated, call it 10 trillion in assets, I believe. The numbers are like a little blurred, but we're going to call it there. And by 2030, so 5 years, 5 years, it's going to 3x, 30 trillion. So if we just like, I don't know, that's a little bit like this, and then this is the curve. Like it goes up real rapid. And part of why it's so important is we have to be prepared. We can't just receive this money and then sort of be like, now what? Or find a male financial advisor and say, now what? We need to be educated. We need to be confident. And so step one is really dealing with our money anxiety. And I don't think it's like an overnight fix. It's not listening to this podcast and all of a sudden you're better. But I do think it's important we start talking about it, like with our friends. I have a really good friend who we sat on the couch one time and we hadn't seen each other since we were kids, but she is someone I care about deeply. And we just hashed through our money anxiety. And we come from such different places. Maybe our backgrounds in growing up were quite similar, but she is an incredibly successful woman. She's a high powered attorney and she makes more money than I'll probably ever see in my life. And I love that for her. And then I have been on an entrepreneurial journey the past few years, and I have plenty to be grateful for. But we were coming at our current money anxiety from totally different perspectives, and yet we still both felt it because money anxiety is anxiety. It's not totally rational. It isn't indicative of how much money you have in the bank or how much you're earning. It's just like that anxiety that eats you up inside. So, how do we deal with it? And honestly, I think a huge part of it is the conversation and education, because normalizing that it exists and having conversations about it with everyone, I mean, not everyone, but the people in your community, I think that matters. And an anecdote that I'll throw out there is even at the studio, when someone loses their job and they come to the studio being like, we have to pause our membership, I never ask why, well, actually, sometimes I do, like, why? I'd like the feedback, but most of the time I won't ask why. It's not my business. But sometimes people will say, I lost my job. Well, you need yoga now more than ever then. So like, let me give you a free membership for a few months. But be how honest and vulnerable that you were willing to say that. And now there's something we can do about that. And the reason I share that anecdote is because if that person or those people hadn't been honest about the fact that they lost their job, I wouldn't be offering them a free membership. And they wouldn't feel more comfortable, more safe to move around in their bodies or whatever it might be. And that little piece of vulnerability and honesty, the more we normalize that, hopefully more pieces like that ripple piece starts to happen. I want to tell another pretty personal story because I started my career on Wall Street, which I actually think is why people all the time ask me, how to invest their money or how to save their money or whatever it might be. And first of all, I would like to say that I'm not a wealth advisor. I'm not a financial advisor. I had my Series 7, 63, 55, but it's been a lot of years. But I also have invested millions of dollars either on behalf of myself or on behalf of others. I have managed money in the market for decades. I have worked at some of the biggest funds in the world, at some of the biggest banks in the world. So while I undermined myself 30 seconds ago, I also do have loads of experience in this space. And I'm glad to be a resource. And I hope that I can be a resource in helping more women feel really confident and comfortable in investing. But I will say that I always wanted to work on Wall Street. So money has always been not even necessarily like Warren Buffett, he wanted to accumulate money his whole life, and that's how he ended up where he was. It was just a fascinating piece to me. The market is so interesting. The market is not totally mathematical. There's surely a mathematical piece there, but there's so much humanity in it of things that don't make sense. The way the market moves isn't totally sensical, and there's always more to learn. And that's why I love it. That's why I've always found it so fascinating. But I will tell you, I'm really spiraling this back, but I was just with my parents and my mother was telling someone the story of why did I always want to work on Wall Street. We tell the story very different, but I think it's a funny story, so I'm going to share. I had cousins and uncles that lived in New York, and I loved them all so much. I still do, obviously. And I looked up to them a lot. And I think growing up in the Midwest, I aspired to live a cool New York lifestyle. And knowing that they worked on Wall Street as bond salesmen, that was almost like my way to get there. So that's in my mind what I've always said. It was like my vehicle to get to New York, and I always loved it. I loved math, all of those things. My mother tells the story that my incredible aunt had an equally incredible ring, and that I one day apparently went up to her and said, "Someday I want to buy that for myself." And I have zero recollection of this, but I for those of you that knew me when I was like 6 years old, that tracks to a T. So, we'll combine both stories. I'm sure there's like a little bit of truth in all of it. And I ended up on Wall Street and I loved it. I did. I loved everything about it. My whole job, and I still to some degree my job now is to meet the smartest people and to understand how they think. And so that curiosity that I talked about before was perfect because I wanted to understand my clients' needs. I wanted to understand how they were thinking, the bets they were making, why they were making them, the dollar amount, why they would like I could tell you a million questions and that's all I wanted to do. And so it was the best job in the world for a lot of reasons. But I remember my first big paycheck, not just like salary check, although I was making great money, I would say that. My first big check, I put it into a bank account, and for years, it sat in a bank account. And I have plenty of regrets and plenty of things I beat myself up about. But that is always one of them that I go back to. And I think, damn, I lost a lot of money by keeping that in a bank account. And let me explain why I say that I actually lost money. So many reasons. But one, a dollar today is worth way more than a dollar tomorrow. And you've heard that. But let me explain there's a variety of whys, but one of the big whys for me is inflation. So as a can of soda was 80 cents, 75. I think of those three quarters in like a vending machine when I was growing up. That really dates me. I don't even think vending machines exist anymore, but it's probably like 250 if I went to Target now. But that cost is theoretically inflation. So if I was holding a dollar today, what it would buy me, what I'd be able to buy with it today is probably worth a lot more than tomorrow. I mean, you hear our elders talk, I am your elder, probably talk about this all the time, how things were so much cheaper and all of that. But it's real. And so if you just have your money, like think about it, sitting under your bed or like in a bank account, not really accumulating anything, it's not going to be worth as much tomorrow. So that's part of why you have to invest. Even having a high interest savings account is better than just having it sit in under your bed or wherever people put it, when they're nervous. Um, and so I had it just sitting in like a pretty basic bank account, bless Bank of America, but they were definitely not giving me the interest that I needed on that. And so call it a year and a half, 2 years, maybe even 3 years later, when I finally did invest it, I beat myself up about that all the time because what an opportunity cost. It could have been compounding. And I'll tell you, this is theoretical money, fair, but hundreds of thousands of theoretical dollars that I could have earned, built, saved to some degree, but I was scared. And it was the first time I ever received such a big check. I mean, it was it will probably forever be something that I remember. And it was paralyzing because bless my parents, but I was a grown adult. They weren't going to tell me what to do with that money. So they let me be independent and learn these mistakes myself. But I didn't know what to do with it. And I was so paralyzed. I didn't even ask questions. I'm sure had I gone to them and asked them what to do, they 100% would have helped me. But I was so anxious. And it was so, I didn't think I identified it as anxiety at the time, but it 100% was money anxiety. The fact that I put in a bank account and I didn't think about it. I continued on with my life almost as if I didn't earn it. Like I wasn't spending more. It happened and I moved on. And I think that's pretty common with people that have money anxiety. It's that not necessarily indicative of how much, again, we have in the bank or how much we're learning or earning. It's just we don't know what to do. We don't even know the questions to ask. But that's hopefully part of what we'll unpack with this episode is ask people. Don't be scared to ask and have conversations. And in the past 18 months, the number of my friends that have, since I've been talking about this more, that have felt comfortable coming to me and we just have really open conversations, has been hopefully helpful to them, but also helpful to me because I think, again, the more we normalize this, the more we can work through it as a community. The other piece that I want to bring up on top of inflation is also that the dollar right now, so the US dollar, is losing value compared to other currencies. And this, I mean, it ebbs and flows. I remember when I lived in Australia, 2011, the Australian dollar was worth so much more than the US dollar. Or when I lived in the UK, the pound was worth so much more than the USD. And then, of course, every time I've left those countries, it's like almost inverted, but whatever. But so it continues to ebb and flow. And right now, for the past, I think like 6, 8 weeks, the US might even be slightly more. The USD has been declining. So that means when you compare, if you were to buy um, a Coke in the UK versus a Coke in the States, before you might have had to pay $2 to buy a Coke in the UK versus $1, like it changes. All that to say, as the USD declines, we have to spend maybe $3, $4 to buy that Coke in the UK versus just 1 or 2. That is another reason why investing is so important, because to some degree, there's innate risk in all of this, but there is some degree of diversification that you get when you invest. So hopefully in the market, you're earning 6, 8, 10, 12+% per year. And as call it inflation historically was like, I don't know, 2 or 3%. I think the past year it's been 8, just kidding, but it's been a lot. So you take off inflation, just say you were earning 10%. So then you have 7% of gains there. And then let's say the US dollar is worth even less. So there's like, it helps to narrow that gap of what a dollar is worth today versus tomorrow, on top of hopefully compounding wealth. And I talked about this in one of my Instagram posts a while back of compound interest and how helpful it is. Because if you earn a dollar today, and you add that to the bank, then you have $2. You get to earn that interest on now the $2 versus just the dollar. And so I'm not even talking big money here. If at the end of each month you put $100 into your Schwab account, who is not sponsoring this podcast, but I would love them to, you will continue to add dollars for which you're earning more and more from. If that didn't make sense, just pop it in the comments and I can re-explain that again. But the earlier you put money into a savings, into the market, the more money will compound. And just naturally, that's why when people retire, it like grows and grows and grows. Part of it is because of, they'll call it the 8% per year that it's gaining in the market, but also it's because that 8% it's gaining in the market then goes back into the bucket. And next year, the bucket is bigger because it had the 8% from last year. And then you earn another 8% on that huge bucket. And it just keeps making the bucket bigger. Okay. All that to say, there's never going to be a right time to start investing. You're never going to have all the information. The market is never going to be perfectly timed for when it dips. Just like there's never going to be a right time to buy a house or get married or have kids or whatever it is. But I will tell you this. You want to invest starting yesterday. Like I wish that I started investing earlier and earlier, and there's nothing we can do about it except for doing more today and working against our anxiety today. So again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not like a legal wealth manager, but between my time in Wall Street, my experience investing in the market and in alternatives, I can share a little bit about my go-tos, and I'm happy to continue the conversation offline if you want to like send me a message. But I use Schwab. They should 100% sponsor this. I just find the platform super easy to use, and transparently, when I started investing, there weren't loads of platforms like Robinhood and Betterment and all of that now. And so Schwab has just been super native to me from that perspective, but it allows you to do all sorts of things. And truly, everyone should start with the basics. Like we're just trading S&P 500 type things. But I believe in tracking the market. I believe in really low cost trackers. I'm still arguably young, so the way I invest probably is still a fair bit more exposure to risk than maybe my parents when they invest. And you can see that as like, I really like to invest in alternatives, i.e. Real estate or early stage startups, venture capital, private equity, all of that's considered alternatives. But if you're interested in learning more about like, I use again, not sponsored, but I use Capital One high interest savings. They have a really good one. I know that Goldman bought, blanking on the name of the company, but they bought a really great high interest savings organization that you can like get a great percentage for. But all of those percentages change as the savings rate changes. So a CD is a great option to like lock in a savings rate for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And especially when you know that rates are going to decline, that's a great option to like hop in early and put a chunk of cash in there. But again, if you have more questions, drop them in the comments so that when we come back for season 2, we can keep talking about this. And I'm going to throw another stat at you that only 12% of women say they feel really confident in their ability to retire comfortably. And part of that I really struggle with because only 12% of women, part of that is also the game has changed. I think a lot of our parents bought $100,000 houses, which I'm sure at the time was a lot of money, but now, and I granted I'm biased, I live in LA, you can't buy a home for under $1 million. And it's you probably have to put a lot more money into it to make it the house that our parents bought back in the day, anyways. And it's just a different game. Is there really a value in buying a home? This is a question I would love to unpack on an episode if people are interested, because I have so many opinions here and have modeled this out so many different ways. The bar to retirement is just different. It's higher. We don't have the same incentives in companies anymore to stay for a really long time. Different game. But the other side of it is that only 12% of women feel really confident in retiring. And I think part of that comes from our education and our confidence with investing. And so I want to keep putting out resources. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a wealth advisor. I spent plenty of years around the smartest people on Wall Street, and I am incredibly lucky to still be learning from them today. And I love it. And I will say, I have made myself good money from investing. Part of the reason I am so lucky to be able to be an entrepreneur is because I've made not like brainiac decisions, but I have spent time learning and educating and experimenting in the market, to where I am able to be an entrepreneur and venture investor. I think I talked about almost everything that I wanted to talk about. I definitely left some things out. So if you have more questions, we're going to continue with our hot take episodes even until season 2 starts. So there will still be content being produced. But if there's anything that specifically you want to talk about in season 2, if you like more of these money takes, my hope, and we'll sort of see dependent on how the guests feel about it, is to bring some of these topics in, still bring incredible entrepreneurs in, but ask them about their money anxiety and talk to them about what makes them feel really confident. I just want you all to know, like, you're not alone with your financial anxiety, and we all have financial fear that we have to unlearn and rebuild. We've all been there, we've all had it, and we're all going to figure it out together. So I can't wait for season 2. Thank you all so much for listening. It means so much. And for those of you that have reached out and written comments or whatever it is, thank you. And please let me know what you want more of. And I can't wait for season 2. Thank you all for tuning in. See you in a few weeks.